This is Professor Rogers. This video is entitled Categories of Research. Though the name does not do justice to the variety of topics that I will summarize here. The issue is a simple one. The term research encompasses a variety of methods, theories, and applications, so research is often divided into different categories. In this video, I discuss 3 ways in which the broad category of research is divided. Specifically, I discuss 3 divisions: the type of research, the logic or modes of reasoning in research, and the uses or applications of research. There are different types or kinds of research: experiments, clinical trials, surveys, interviews, focus groups, ethnographies, participant observation, and narrative analysis are some of the many different methodologies used in the social sciences and health professions. The most general division of research into types contrasts quantitative research with qualitative research. Quantitative research is fairly easy to define. It involves the collection of data that will ultimately be analyzed using statistical techniques. The results of experiments, clinical trials, and surveys are often studied using statistical techniques, and hence are regarded as quantitative. Quantitative analysis is often described as objective because different researchers should get the same result if they analyze the data the same way. However, I personally resist thinking about quantitative research as more objective than other types of research because it requires the arbitrary acceptance of certain assumptions about the nature of knowledge and the social scientific enterprise. But the point that it is easier to replicate a quantitative analysis of the same data is true. Qualitative research, by contrast, requires some level of subjective interpretation. Here, 2 different researchers might come to different conclusions using the same data. Interviews, focus groups, ethnographies, participant observation studies, and narrative analysis share the problem of subjective interpretation. However, here again I caution the blind labeling of qualitative research as subjective. A variety of approaches related to grounded theory, use of multiple coders, and textual analysis software can be incorporated to make the interpretation of qualitative research more objective. There are other ways to describe the division of research. Perhaps one of the most important is the presence of different modes of reasoning or different kinds of logic in research. Each of these involves the scientific method, but they differ where theory is placed in the study. One mode of reasoning is called deductive, the other inductive. Deduction and induction are not theories in themselves, but instead are ways that we incorporate theory into our analysis. To understand this, let's look at the scientific research process, which is sometimes described as a wheel with 5 parts. We start with a theory, form a hypothesis, implement an appropriate research methodology, analyze the results, and then generalize back to our theory. Deductive reasoning moves exactly in this order and is the standard way in which the steps of the scientific method are described. Our theory is the starting point from which everything emanates. The point is to test whether the ramifications of our theory are true. Inductive reasoning starts at a different point. When we do not know exactly what the theory should be, we do the research first and then figure out the theory later. There is also a third mode of reasoning, which we can call pragmatic reasoning. It proceeds through a trial and error process with little interest in theory. It is often ascribed to inventors like Thomas Edison. We can also categorize research by its use or application. This doesn't have to do with the methodology as much as it has to do with the purpose of our research. Basic research has to do with seeking knowledge simply for the sake of knowledge. It is the kind of research that we often attribute to academic institutions, when academics pursue theories that seem somewhat abstract or not tied to our daily lives. For example, I might want to determine whether social disorganization theory or social bond theory is the best explanation for the causes of crime. Applied research has to do with addressing a very specific problem. For example, I might want to know why crime rates on the south side of Youngstown, Ohio, are higher than crime rates in the rest of the city. The techniques that I would use to address the applied question might be some of the same techniques I used in basic research. However, I am less interested in contributing to theory and more concerned about very practical issues that could guide efforts at crime prevention. Finally, evaluation research is done after a program or intervention is finished in order to establish whether it worked. For example, I might increase police patrols around various hotspots in the south side of Youngstown as part of a crime prevention strategy. It's useful to think of the three categorizations of research that I just described: types of research, modes of reasoning, and the use of research as independent dimensions of research. I raise this point because of a current trend in academia that has tried to make unjustified claims about the relationship of the dimensions. For example, there are researchers teaching that all quantitative research is deductive and all qualitative research is inductive. This is not true. If we were to look at classic texts on methodology or the history of social scientific methodology, we would see that early researchers did not make this distinction. For them, a person should pick the research method to fit a specific question, not a specific mode of reasoning. This distinction has appeared in some academic disciplines since the 1970s as a reaction to the perceived dominance of positivism and quantitative studies in certain sectors of social science. As a result, some qualitative researchers tried to differentiate what they were doing and ended up offering false claims about the relationship of the type of research and modes of reasoning. Hopefully this video has given you some insight into the terminology that we use to categorize research.